can't give you the formula. I don't know how the heck we have had success or any of that. But what I've seen is when you have at least two people involved, rather than a single person trying to make it go, I've seen those situations be much more successful.
The more we dig into what we know or what we know we don't know, we get more aware of what we don't know to start that cycle over again.
Whatever your economic class is, whatever your sexual preference is, whatever, the truth about money can transcend all of those things. Welcome to the Cash Flow Legends podcast with your hosts Nate, Brandon, and Brock. Remember, our insights are not direct financial advice, so consult with your financial team before making any decisions based on the topics discussed in this show.
All right, welcome back to Cash Flow Legends. We are stoked to be here. Nate and I have lots of dear friends in the world of infinite banking, becoming your own banker, but there are very few friends that mean as much to us as this guy sitting in front of us. Chris, we're really excited to have you today, and we were having a phenomenal laugh before we hit record.
Yeah.
It'll come up naturally.
Isn't that how it always happens?
It is. I think they call that B-roll because you can't always be sure that you would post that if you just hit record from the beginning. But it'll really intertwine with our conversation today. So Chris asked us before we even hit record, what do you really want to be sure your listeners or YouTube watchers get out of this? And the truth is we just want them to really have a genuine feel of our relationship and our connection to Chris and the role that you've played in our journey of teaching and living this life and this process of infinite banking, becoming your own banker. But Chris, I'm going to start with a question and I'll kind of segue into you introducing yourself, and then Nate will hit you with a question. So if you would have been told 6 years ago, roughly, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when you met Nate and I in Kansas, and we were at one of your think tanks, that you would be on a podcast with us talking about the same things that you spent so many hours teaching us for all of those years, what would you have said to that?
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Tell us why.
Yeah, I mean, a variety of reasons. One, when we first met you guys, and you started as clients and going through our process, and so our process is pretty involved. It's very relationship oriented. I tell people all the time, we are not a transactional organization. We're not the most efficient people in the world, but we care about you and we want to help you accomplish your goals. And IBC might have a part in that. Yep. But it might not also.
Yeah.
Sure.
I talked, one of our clients, Julie, from Iowa, she was at a boot camp. I sat down, we started having a conversation, and we're talking about finances, but I'm starting to pick up pieces that she's got some other things in her life right now that are more important than her finances right now. And she ended up going to this personal growth seminar that several of our team members have been a part of. I didn't even know she was ever going to become a client. But so anyway, our process is very people-centered. So when you two and your wives were going through that process, we got to know you and what your goals were. What I appreciate about both of you is the vulnerability and authenticity, the realness that you guys provide and share and are willing to share. And then, at some point you guys expressed interest in learning more. And I had given some thought to different avenues that folks could take. We have some coaches that I think of, one that he's a pastor. He's doing his life's work, but he loves infinite banking. So he also got licensed. So if he refers anybody to us, we write him in on the commission, but he's doing his life's work. But you guys, from the beginning, you were pretty clear. You're like, no, we want to create our own business, our own agency. We want to build our own thing. And we were cautious about who we were going to commit to, because as you guys know, when you mentor someone and you do it well, it is not a moneymaker. It is time intensive. And so we were very thoughtful about that. A couple things happened. One, you guys came to Lawrence to visit us and hang out with us and be a part of a live boot camp. That showed us something. We're very much about people have to have skin in the game, right? We're willing to meet you halfway. If you've read Nelson's book, if you've gone to boot camps, webinars, all the things in our process, we'll take you to home. And you guys demonstrated that. The other thing I would say is we were like-minded in our faith, our ideas about family, what we wanted the business to look like. It's about serving people. And so those things were in alignment with us. And then the other thing I would say is my observation has been when people have met with us about going into IBC, I have seen, and I can't give you the formula. I don't know how the heck we have had success or any of that. But what I've seen is when you have at least two people involved rather than a single person trying to make it go, I've seen those situations be much more successful. And like my business partner, Mike Everett, and myself, I saw in you two a complementary relationship where Nate had these skills, these talents, this energy, and Brandon complemented that with his logical process-oriented skill set as well. So all of those things kind of, if you were to draw a Venn diagram, there was a lot of intersections. I was like, I think these guys can make it work. And your background as well. I mean, in your former lives, right? When you bring a teacher and a pastor together, and the skills that go into that and the heart that goes into that. Yeah. So to me, honestly, it wasn't a surprise, but I wouldn't say that about everybody we've worked with. There's a lot of people I'm like, I don't think this is going to work.
That's good.
We had Mike on a few weeks ago, and we were hoping to have both of you on at the same time, but it didn't work out. But I think this is actually better. I think we can have different conversations. And whenever I started the conversation with him, I almost got choked up, and I'm fighting it back right now because of just how much you guys mean to us. And when we talked about like what we wanted people to get out of this meeting, I think when you are extremely grateful and proud of your mentors, you want other people to meet your mentors. We're grateful and very proud that we get to be part of y'all's circle, get to be part of y'all's story. Y'all are part of our story. But I
Well,
asked,
can I just interrupt you, sir?
sure.
Because the pride goes both ways, as you know, and you can link this back, and I'm getting emotional. You can link this back to your kids, right? When you get to see your kids living their best life and they're thriving and they're using their talents and their skills to make a dent in this world for the positive, that is, I mean, I remember watching one of these charts, that the life insurance companies have on production, and that's not what it's all about. But man, when I see you guys right up there, not just with us, but ahead of us, that makes me proud. So I share in that pride with you.
We
The cool
appreciate
piece,
that.
the cool piece related to that, and we didn't have an exact topic that we were going to touch on, but there's something that we say all the time when we're meeting with anybody almost. You mentioned who, not how before we started recording. And who, not how, a lot of times will have some threads of mentorship in there, or it'll be a central theme of it. For anybody listening or watching, if you are drawn to potentially be mentored by somebody, now that we have 6 years of perspective from how Life Success and Legacy through Mike and Chris and their team have poured into us through taking us through their process and I can vouch for what Chris said. Their process is transformational, not transactional, which has become a big part of our process. And when you get to be mentored by people who have a heart for your overall well-being, the main thing doesn't always end up staying the main thing. It may start as the main thing, but all these other things come into play. So one of the things I always remember you telling us, Chris, that I share with other people that we have the privilege to mentor now is this. You and Mike had made it clear to us, hey guys, we're here to support you, help you grow all the things that we're doing already. And you're inside the Life Success and Legacy nest is the way that y'all would describe it. But we want to be sure that when you're ready to jump out or we kick you out, however you want to look at that, you can fly, but you know that you can come back. And you said this to us, Chris, and I use this often, is you said, the only request I have at all this is when you guys go out and you kill it, which was breathing confidence into us, any great ideas that you come along, just share them with us. And what an abundant way to think and live and to interact with people, because that is very opposite of the traditional world of business. One, you don't want to kick people out of your nest for success. You want to keep them there and chained to it where they can only fly so far so you can get the benefits of it. And two, you don't want to share information in the traditional world of business. And that's what I think we all love about what we get to do, is it's way more purpose related. And oftentimes, Chris, that conversation you were having with the client, the money is secondary. It becomes something else. It becomes, how are you with what's going on in your life mentally, socially, emotionally, physically, all the things that we deal with, which then often circles back to trust being built or solidified for the conversations about money when that becomes relevant. That's really what you guys poured into us, is that if we're going to do this the way we thought we wanted to, you gave us a ton of clarity on the right way to do it related to y'all's skill sets that were similar to ours that we didn't even know were going to permeate through our business now. So
Thanks
we're
for
very
that.
grateful for that.
Oftentimes I feel like our life success legacy infinite banking concept business, what we do is really almost like a cover up. It's like the storefront. But when you actually get behind the storefront, you get in there, you're like, what we really are about is helping people create the lives that they want. And oftentimes there's a financial element to that, which that's where IBC comes in. Sean and I, my wife Sean and I, we're an example. We're using IBC to create the life we want, but it's not all about, like, we're not like pound, passive income. We want to build as much as we can. That's not us. Clients of ours are crushing us when it comes to that stuff. We are about creating the life we want, and we like joy and simplicity. And so I'm not chasing every shiny object, because it's about the life I want to create. And so that's where, like, we use the dream conversation, which is to give credit where credit's due. Dan Sullivan, and strategic coach, years ago, I read this little book, because all of his books are little, because he works with entrepreneurs, and most of them don't have a attention span, right? And it was just this series of questions to take it to a deeper level. Well, I just adapted that to what we use even to this day, the dream conversation. And what it does is it helps us get beyond the financial piece. Oftentimes it might be the husband or the wife. It, could be either one. But when we start meeting, they're like, yeah, my spouse, they are along with me. They trust me. I'm just going to do this. And we go, time out. This is not a transactional thing. And I guarantee you, your spouse has some views on what they want your life together to be. And so we will do the dream conversation with both of you. And that might frustrate you, but from our experience, we have found great value in that.
So to tell you how impactful the dream conversation is for anybody listening or watching, we use some version of that still. We used it immediately when we began doing everything on our own. But I still remember and use one of those questions or some form of it about, hey, if you're 3 years into the future looking back, what dangers, what things are you excited about? What are on your list? What are your top 3? Here's the fascinating thing about asking deeper questions that I love, which is why I think we have the best job in the world, is you realize quickly how uncommon it is to have deep, thought-provoking questions and conversation, because almost always people gloss over it the first time you ask that, and they don't even realize it's going to require them to go to a deeper place in their brain. So I have to repeat it, and it makes them uncomfortable
When
because
you
that's not
said
common
that,
for them.
I'm sorry.
You
When you
guys go ahead.
said that our business was kind of a disguise, it reminded me of something that James Clear said. He said entrepreneurship is a personal growth engine disguised as a business pursuit. And our businesses, because of how ULC and LSL are aligned, operate in very similar ways, in the fact that when people come into our process, they're getting a lot more than they signed up for, and they're not realizing it. We actually yesterday met with a guy, and at the end of the conversation, he said, this was way more than I expected. This was way more comprehensive than I realized it was going to be. So he realized very quickly, as he was exposed and we were going through these things, that we're not here to sell a product. We are here to find out and meet you where you're at. Find out how we can come alongside you and help you. And if that results in a product, great. But if it doesn't, like now that we have met and we have this connection, there's going to be some sort of expansion of knowledge that comes through that, which is going to be transformational. And that's what we're focused on, is like, we just want to make impacts on people. We want to know that every interaction we have, they leave better than they showed up.
Chris, there is no doubt that you guys fostered that, gave us a phenomenal framework to start with, encouraged us to make it our own. I mean, if you were to like say, this is the ideal way to be mentored, you guys would be that. And so we are jaded often when we interact with people that have not experienced that. And it breaks Nate and I's heart because it's not as common as I would like to believe. It's under the guise of mentorship where it's really transactional. And you hit the nail on the head earlier. And Mike Everett says this, often, too much is given, much is expected. And I do believe that, and I agree with that. To be able to mentor somebody, you guys had other experiences with it to where you were like, hey, we want to be cautious to be sure that these guys are serious. So you have built ways to be sure that we had skin in the game, like flying to Lawrence, Kansas and spending 2 days. When you find your right people, you cannot deny that there is a connection there that couldn't have just happened on its own. And what I mean by that is, Chris, you said something before we even hit record. I didn't realize this. You took your first principal job at 30, exactly the same time I took my first principal job, which in education is not common. Before we hit record, you said, Chris, so we're basically going to do it like we do our podcast, where I make sure everything is organized, and Mike Everett just runs around and I keep him in order, just like Nate does. I was like, yeah. It's a really cool thing. So we can go anywhere with this conversation, and I'll just kind of frame it with this. So you guys have been doing and teaching the process of infinite banking and becoming your own banker, and you guys knew Nelson Nash personally. We don't ever want to have too long of a conversation about infinite banking or becoming your own banker without mentioning Nelson's name. And you guys poured that into us, and we're grateful for that. So Nate says often, we didn't know Nelson personally, okay, but we came from quality stock of who knew Nelson. And so tell us a little bit about Nelson, a story or a key thing or something that he imparted on you after all your years of interaction with him.
Yeah. So my connection to Nelson Nash would never have happened without Mike Everett. I think Mike grew up without a dad, and I think Nelson played that role for Mike in many ways. They had an ongoing conversation. Mike could call him up anytime he wanted. I remember sitting in the basement at Mike Everett's old house. Crawford was there, Mike Crawford and myself, and we're going through Nelson's book. And we had a practice that we would, whenever we met, we would always designate a certain section of the book that we would all read and then come back. And we wanted to make sure that we were crystal clear on what Nelson was saying. And there was one section where we weren't. Even Mike Everett, he was like, I don't know what he meant by that. So he let Mike Everett fashion. He's like, he picks up his phone, he calls Nelson, and the four of us are sitting there. He's got him on speakerphone, and we're having a conversation with Nelson. We're like, Nelson, what did you mean by this? Like, we're not following what you meant by this. Having that ability to reach out to the guy who was blessed with this concept that changed his life in a period of crisis for him. I mean, that was just unbelievable. And then, of course, we would go to the think tanks every year, and there would be a select group that got to have dinner with Mary and Nelson's wife, Mary, who just passed away this winter. And so, you got to be in this room with the conversations, kind of like Hamilton. I want to be in the room when it happens, right? I got to be in that room riding Mike Everett's coattails. And I've learned so much, have developed some really cool relationships. I would say I'm not like that first tier of the Mike Everetts and the James Netherys and those folks who knew Nelson, developed friendships, had him come speak in their hometowns repeatedly, all those kinds of things. I'm more like second or third generation. And so my connections are with other second and third generation kind of people that have been mentored by the Jason Lowe's. So Winnie Lau and I are close, those kinds of things. One story I would share is I had great hesitation. Nelson came to Lawrence a couple of times. One was outside of Baldwin, which is a smaller, more rural community. and Mike Everett hosted him. And then we decided to ask Nelson if he would come to Lawrence, and we hosted at a hotel, a nice hotel up on KU's campus. And I had so many hesitations because Nelson is a Southern Christian white gentleman, and he doesn't pull any punches, and some of his jokes would not necessarily fly. When you look at Kansas, it is a red state, but where I live, Lawrence, Kansas, the university town, is a blue dot in a sea of red. And I know our folks, and I'm like, I mean, we have every walk of life in our clientele, right? And I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna fly. So I went, and Nelson came, and he just has this personality that captures people, and you know he's done his work. He is a learned, well-read, thoughtful man. And so you might not agree with everything he says from his opinions, but when he speaks the truth, it doesn't matter where you come in from. And I remember going up to one of my buddies who is quite liberal, and asking him, he and his wife, I was like, so what'd you think? I'm like, do I ask? I was like, what do you think? And he's like, he's fantastic. I was like, so some of the stuff that he said, like on this topic or this, he's like, I just used his own logic. Just some of that's noise. Nelson, like anybody else, is a man, right? He's not perfect. And we've had some clients who are like, you guys almost like worship him. And I said, that's good feedback, because we don't worship him. We respect him and we honor what he has provided. But I appreciate that feedback.
That's a great story.
Truth transcends, and whatever your economic class is, whatever your sexual preference is, whatever, the truth about money can transcend all of those things. And just like we have clients from all walks of life. And so just because we believe certain things and operate and have certain values or whatever doesn't mean that we can't still come alongside people and have a great impact on their situation, their life, and everything like that. And the beauty of of what we get to do is, because we don't have a boss that tells us what we can and cannot say, is if our faith bleeds into our conversation, you either like it or you don't.
Well, it reminds me, probably perfect timing. So you said Nelson was a very learned man, and I am always drawn to, when I get to hear, no matter what tier it is of who knew him, however well they knew him, you always hear stories about how he was always learning and thinking about how he thinks or how he thought. And ruminating is a word of his that he used a lot, that I love to use, because it draws people in. They're like, "What? That's not a normal word." Yeah, I say, well, and so the more we dig into what we know, or what we know we don't know, we get more aware of what we don't know, to start that cycle over again. And you guys just alluded to it beautifully, diving into the word this morning, and it makes it very clear. All these things are things, but the most important one is love. So we cannot connect with people and engage them wherever they are and pour into them if we're not doing it from a place of love. And with our background with Nate in ministry, and with you and I as education and principles, sometimes it's hard to find love in certain situations. So the cool part about what we get to do daily is we get to really meet people where they're at, like you've alluded to, Chris, with all the things you do with Life Success and Legacy, and your team does, and all the things that we do. And if you were to really say, what is Unlimited Life Concepts most like, it's Life Success and Legacy, because the foundation of who we are is who you guys are. And we even say things like, oh, I think we found our Shelly. Okay. And Shelly's on y'all's team, who does a phenomenal job with client interaction and all the things going on behind the scenes. We would have never had context of that if we hadn't gone through y'all's transformational process. Like when I see Shelly,
and then we found our Crawford.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. when I see Shelly, she's not going, "How many policies have you funded?" She said, "Tell me about the kids. How's the wife? How's the family?" And that is something that I think of what we get to do that makes what we do special in a way that's hard to really put into words, because it goes well beyond what I just did on a piece of paper or what check I signed.
So much of how our organization, I think you guys as well, has developed has been, I'm going to use the term organic. It's not like for us, it's not like, oh, we had this vision of here's where we want to be and what it's going to look like and all that. What Life Success and Legacy became or is becoming is a product of who's been a part of the team. We never would have had our software, for example, had we not had Mike Crawford a part of the team. Because the rest of us, he's got more in his pinky fingernail than the rest of us when it comes to technology. We have built this around people's unique qualities, unique abilities. If you use strategic coach, like what are those people? We spend a lot of time doing that. And there's several factors that we found have been helpful to us. And that is first of all, we don't hire very often. We don't add to our core team very often. But when we do, we only hire from within our client base. So when we were talking earlier about our process and the dream conversation and that we know their finances and we know their marriage and all those things, Mike Kwong would say it this way. He's like, I interviewed with you guys for 2 years. We are currently bringing on Haley David Schofer to our team. And again, she brings a whole different set of skills that we don't have. So it's complementary. She's been a client for years. We started talking to her over a year ago about it. She was the one who brought it up. She's like, I love IBC and I love how you guys operate. We bring people on board over a long process. We already know them because they've been clients, and it just becomes clear. This person has something that we don't have, we need, and they're a good match for who we are. And so that's kind of how our process has happened.
You just made me think about something. We were talking about how, as we went off on our own and you said, hey, just share the things that you learn. When you mentioned Mike Kwong, I realized there's a web of connection going back to something that we shared that has been very impactful in y'all's business that we didn't necessarily implement at the level y'all did, but y'all took that information and just turned it into something really powerful.
What was that
You
information?
talking about I think
the income snowball.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that kind of gives point that we talk about so many different ideas, that.
Yeah.
Yep.
No,
That's
the
exactly
income
right.
snowball, that's become a big part of y'all's teaching and everything like that. And
Yeah, I'll talk on that a little bit because we have worked really hard to be stay in our lane, and we don't want to be income snowball coaches. We told the folks at Tardis right away, we are not in competition. We see this as a collaborative effort, and we weren't looking for anything necessarily. We don't refer to other companies very often. We did a little bit to a company that did some real estate early on, but we don't even do that anymore. And so really, Tardis is the only outside company that we will mention to people. When you think about infinite banking, we always do this. You guys have seen this 1,000 times. There's 4 things that IBC does, in our opinion. Number 1, eliminate outside debt, right? And that's where people start typically. In Nelson's research, about 34.5% of every dollar is going to interest on our debt. That's where most Americans are living. Well, if I can turn that 34.5% my direction and get to reuse that money, and it's guaranteed because it's my money, that's a pretty good return. So that's typically where people start, but not everybody. Met with a young man in Oklahoma yesterday. Did you guys know Oklahoma doesn't allow basements? They're right there in Tornado Alley, and they don't allow basements because of the soil.
Wow. I did not know that.
I was like, dude, do you have a safe room or something? My wife would never live in
That's
Oklahoma.
unfortunate.
So number 2 is building your, as Nelson would call it, your warehouse of wealth from where you can deploy money for anything you want to do, which often leads to the third, which is passive income. Right. And then the 4th is tax-free wealth transfer through the death benefit. But that third one, the passive income, we weren't really telling people what they should do for that. And even today, we don't really. We'll say, hey, we have clients who do this and this and this. We give them options, and we'd be happy to connect you with some of those people. But we work really hard. There's a book a long time ago by Jim Collins called Good to Great, and he talks about the hedgehog concept. And that's like, the hedgehog role does one thing really well is the fox is trying to attack him and trying all these tricks and maneuvers and everything. The hedgehog does one thing really well. He rolls up in a ball and protects himself. And so our hedgehog is we want to be the best in the world at coaching people over their lifetime and generationally about the powers of infinite banking, right? That's what we want to be the best in the world at. That does not mean that we go after every shiny object. And that can be tempting sometimes. So when it comes to the income snowball, Mike Kwong and his wife lived in Hawaii when he was stationed there through the Navy. And Pei, who is a dynamo, she became a coach for TARDIS. And they used the income snowball along with IBC as their line of credit. And they learned it very well and implemented it in their life and then expanded it and everything. And what we found was we started having people from TARDIS reaching out to us because they wanted to use IBC as their funding source, to use Nate's word, leverage, right? They wanted to leverage IBC for their income snowball instead of a traditional loan at the bank or other traditional ways that people get access to money. And Mike Kwong had this unique set of skills, knowledge, and experience that I don't know if there's another human being on the planet that he and Pei together were better suited than them to do this. So we just approached him and said, how do you feel about being our point person? We're seeing some real opportunity to help people that are doing this. And he's like, it's like him breathing. It's not work. He's just telling them what they did. And they've got this little, trail of people are like, yes, let's do that. So I'm going to plug Mike Kwong, my friend. He wrote a book called Dibs on Your Money. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it off of our website at lifesuccesslegacy.com. But our shipping department is Mike Everett. Amazon's much quicker if you want to actually get the book sometime soon. I'm joking. But we don't, we're not selling Mike's book to make money. It's for education purposes. So if you're okay buying from Amazon, get it from Amazon. If you are averse to purchasing from Jeff, then you can get it off of our website. I've been trained because my daughter works at an independent bookstore, and Jeff is a bad name in that world.
I got you. Well, the theme that I've heard you and Nate talk about that is really cool is that in your hiring process, how you don't hire fast, how it's always internal, and your relationship process, it's long range thinking, are really great principles for life. Thinking long range, which is delaying gratification. It has been proven over and over again. The ability to delay gratification for a purpose creates more impact than anything else because you're really thinking long range. Not being afraid to capitalize in relationships and interactions. And I'm not trying to get anything out of this, but bringing value to you. And then obviously not stealing the peas is just, if you're going to treat other things well, why wouldn't you treat yours as good or better?
Can I add to that?
Please do.
This just popped in my head. When you said don't steal the peas and how we're applying it to businesses and things, profit first, which kudos to Brandon. You guys introduced me to that concept. I don't know how many years ago, a long time ago. And it has become an integral part of how we run our business because of that book. And then another book that I read, The Great Game of Business. And most of that book didn't apply to me in my little world, but there was one chapter that just blew my mind. It was about profit sharing. And so originally, when we would do our profit first account, at the end of the quarter, whatever was in there, 50% of that, the owners got to share. Well, over time, and with our core little team who are so loyal and so invested, we're like, well, what if we started doing sharing with our team? And Shelly will tell you, she just said this a couple of weeks ago to a client. We were talking about profit first, their business owner, and I was encouraging. And Shelly said, Oh yeah, my quarterly profit sharing, I make more in that than I do in my hourly wage for the whole quarter. And she wanted to be hourly because and we wanted her to be paid hourly because we wanted her to treat every client the same and not be, basing that on how big of a client, income they might provide or whatever. Profit sharing, what's fun is we get to see how our team now is getting to do some really fun things for their families in their life. And it is because of us sharing in those profits. So we're not stealing the peas of our team. We're sharing, we're putting the peas back on the shelf.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
good. So the key themes from today are getting around people who have transformational mindsets when it relates to mentorship and interaction, and being willing to host two yahoos from Texas at their home state and their home events who knew nothing about them other than, hey, we're interested. We found you. Ironically, we found Mike and Chris on from their podcast, which they had just begun, which is kind of a full circle thing.
2016, I think, is when we started that.
Yeah, and I
I
think
guarantee you, I don't have that much to say. I'm so grateful for Mike Everett and all his words.
y'all interviewed us September of 2018
Is
on
that
the
right?
podcast, and for
We need to
fun,
do another one.
Yep, we
I
do.
went back and listened to that original one not long ago, and it was just like hearing how green we were. And at that time, like when at the very end of the podcast, when you're like, "Hey, how can people find you guys?" We're like, "We have a Facebook page." Like we didn't even have a website. We didn't even have a website at that point. We have a Facebook page. Like that was as far as we'd gotten.
You can find us in the yellow pages.
That's right.
Most of your client base right now is going, what are the yellow
What
pages?
are they talking about?
Hey, as we're wrapping up, I actually have a question. I want to circle back around to you. You asked me back then, would I think I would be on a podcast with you guys and what you've grown and developed at Unlimited Life Concepts. My question to you is, did you think you would be here doing what you're doing now back then?
I can answer very succinctly no. For me, I was so early on in who I am now that I couldn't even see what was possible. Like I didn't even have the wherewithal to think creatively enough to see a vision that far down the road. It was so out of my norm, and I was so uncomfortable even committing to traveling across the United States that I didn't even know if I was going to make it through that. So no, absolutely not. I have a feeling Nate's answer will be a little different.
I do too.
I'm the dreamer. I knew we were going somewhere. I didn't know how fast we were going to get there, but
and how many flames would be involved once you got there.
Man,
no doubt.
I know earlier in our journey, like I would throw these dreams and big ideas out there, Brandon, and you could just hear the hesitation in his voice, like just the thoughts and the ideas that I was throwing at him were making him uncomfortable. And so, man, but God has just done a work in both of us in the last 6 years. And he's brought me down and he's brought Brandon up. And now we're at this really cool level where, like you said, we just complement each other really well. And we've learned a lot about ourselves and a lot about one another. And we've learned how to stay in the gap. Another one of Dan Sullivan's concepts.
Yep, gap in the game.
Stay in the gap,
Stay in the game.
Stay in the game.
Yeah.
Stay in the game. Stay out of the gap.
Yeah.
Recognizing those triggers and everything like that. And so I didn't know where we would end up. I just knew we were heading somewhere fun.
It's been really fun to watch you guys and be cheering you on. Mike Everett talks typically in the context of a marriage, but our business relationships are a marriage, right? Quite dysfunctional at times.
Yep.
And he always talks about in most relationships, there's somebody's the gas and somebody's the brake. And I think in our relationships, Nate and Mike Everett are the gas, and Brandon and I are the brake. We're like that student driver instructor from high school who is like, hovering over that brake over on the right-hand side. And he's like, is today the day I'm going down with this teenager?
Brandon, do you have your dugout mug close to you? Is it in your office?
No, it's not. I don't know. I think it's in my closet
So
right now.
I got him a dugout mug. Do you know what a dugout mug is?
No.
Okay, it's pretty cool. You can go check it out.
Okay.
But they take baseball bats and they make mugs out of them. In fact,
Oh, cool.
you see, I don't know if you can see it, but I've got it sitting right here in the corner of my office, right up there at the top, next to becoming your own banker. So I had our logo put on the front, etched in the front. And as a gift to Brandon on the back, it's in quotations and it says the break. Because we talked about I'm the gas, he's the brake, and a car's got to have both in order to function.
That's right. That's right.
That's exactly right.
Man, I'm so proud of you guys. As a teacher at heart, which I am, when you see students thrive, it is so rewarding. It's absolutely fantastic. So we've always been cheering for you from Lawrence, America. So excited to see everything that you guys have grown, developed, and the amount of people that you're connecting with and helping is super fun to watch. Well done.
We appreciate you. For those out there listening, if you can ever get blessed enough to find a Chris or a Mike in your life, lean into them, provide as much value as you can, because it will return 1,000-fold and bless your life well beyond things that you could really imagine. And that's really what it's about, being able to get in relationships that we're proud of, to work towards living our purpose. And, as a reminder, just in general, the money is just the thing that's an inanimate object. It's really all the other things that allows us to do when we're better stewards of it. So there you go. Yeah. So
I wore it yesterday. It doesn't smell very good. Need to get it in the laundry.
Well, when we're looking at potentially doing a little bit of rebranding or a new logo, so we'll send you a new one when we get it. But
that'd be awesome. I think I had one of your T-shirts before we even had one.
Yep, you did. You did. Chris, we appreciate you joining us today, man. We're very grateful for you, and we look forward to many more of these conversations being recorded and not recorded. And for those of you who found value in this, hit that like, subscribe, and all those buttons that they tell you to hit to push the algorithm. You can find us on cashflowlegends.com. And until we see you on the next one, have a blessed day and a blessed life.